All right, we're in amongst the flock here.
Yeah, we are.
We're covered up in decoys.
I love it, man.
This is one of your favorite parts of turkey hunting, isn't it?
Decoying is definitely one of my favorite parts and one of my favorite things to teach on. I just love it, man. Everything about it. There's so much strategy. How do you know? When you're first getting started, how do you know what decoys to use? They come in different positions. You got the hens, which we're going to cover first. Then you got the jakes and the toms. And now they make all these breeding, scenarios. They make the funky chicken and all kinds of weird stuff that's out there now. Yeah. Wounded turkeys, white turkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you begin?
Yeah.
So that's why I love talking about it. Tons of strategy behind it. We've had a lot of success using decoys.
Well, I would say we begin at the basic hen.
The basic hen.
Yep.
Let's even go back in time to the basic hen.
Back in time?
Back in time, like years ago when we
how
first
far
got
back
started.
We got a date on here, don't we?
We do have a date, and can you read it for me?
1996.
1996. Okay, so you guys heard me tell my story when I first got started. This was my very first decoy. Okay, it's a Delta decoy. It's rubberized. They had them back then. They had like the Flambeau that were a brand that still exists. These brands are still around, but like Flambeau, foam, man, just basic foam.
Yeah.
Not much paint job on them. They were just almost like a silhouette in the field. That's all they were, really.
The foam ones, you would roll them up and shove them in your turkey vest in the pack. And I remember getting out and trying to set up as quick as I could because I had a tom gobbling coming my way. And you unroll them and they're curved like this because they've been rolled up so long. So you'd fold them the other way.
So this one was like
Still
that too.
Still killed birds over it.
Do you know what's inside this one?
Well, I'm going to guess, judging by the spray foam that I see out here, probably spray foam.
Yeah. So desperate, so cheap that I literally had the same problem he had, which I got distracted. This cracks me up, and we don't need to zoom in completely on this, but there's pellets all throughout the neck.
Oh, no, you can't shoot them.
And I know exactly where that came from. So earlier we talked about taking newbies out, getting them on their first bird. This decoy was out all by herself. 2 jakes fly in from a row of an opening through, power lines going up a hill. How it's a wood separation. They love to roost on those, by the way. That's a little extra bonus point. 2 jakes fly in, land in this decoy. They're both working it, doing their circle thing. And a buddy of mine, he takes his first shot at a turkey. He smacked the decoy pretty good, missed the jakes. But the jakes came back, and it was redemption time, and we doubled up that day.
Yeah.
So a lot of good memories there with that old rubberized Delta decoy.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, like I've killed a bunch of birds over the super cheap foam decoys, regardless of what brand they are.
Yeah.
They still work. This, back in that time, was one of the top-notch, highly detailed decoys out there. More expensive decoys, really, for that time period.
Yeah, one of the advantages, excuse me, to having decoys like that back then, obviously, like he said, they come rolled up in a package. So you can have 2 or 3 or 4 of those decoys, put them in your vest. You can't get any more lighter weight than that. They're foam, So it did have its perks. But the decoy industry's transitioned a lot. It's very competitive.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of higher end decoys out there.
Yeah. Now we're to the point where the amount of detail and work that goes into these is just unreal. I mean, they're sculpted by artists, actually sculpt every feather, every little feather vein and detail on there, and then they're hand painted when they're done.
If you guys ever get a chance to go and see some of these decoy brands and go to their facility and see how they're made and how they make the molds and the art that goes behind it, that in and of itself is a cool experience, guys.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Various head positions. I mean, you can see the difference between each one of these has a little different attitude to it. This one here, looking back over its shoulder, you can set up in different scenarios to make it look like it's got a tom trail in it.
That's the key.
And she's still going to keep walking away, and he's going to keep following, trying to get that tom that you're after, the live bird, to come in. Situation like this looks like a boss hen sitting there cutting loud out in front of people. And use that to try and entice the hen to come in.
Yeah, and this one here is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of in between. It's a relaxed hen. She's content, but with the head position and stuff like that. And then they make the other decoys where the head and the neck is more cocked down to be at a feeding position. So they all come with stakes, no matter what brand you get. And having the variation is what I love, because like you were saying, that hen there is communicating something differently. You know, when you were talking about the neck being turned back, I love, that's my favorite hunting scenario is using those two decoys right there. A feeder hen with an upright hen looking back towards a tom that's coming in on both hens. Just love it, man.
Yeah, and speaking of tom decoys,
yeah, let's talk about that.
Certain times you need to use a male in the mix. You know, that dominance is such a big factor. You get the right scenario, that bird hits the field and sees this guy here, believe me, he's running, beard swinging the whole way in. And this decoy, we can't show you on the video because we'd have to get so close up, but he has scuff marks and spur marks all over him. This decoy has been beat up and kicked over so many times. It's unreal what kind of reaction you can get with a strut decoy.
Yeah, and so not just beat up on eastern birds around here. This baby's been around the country. This decoy's been in New Mexico and got tore up out there by Merriam's. Kansas, yeah, you name it.
All over the place.
So a lot of these decoys, this one's getting so chewed up, man. We've put it through the ringer. You can see with the tail fan, nowadays they make them so that you can actually put your own fan on there. And they come with like a little, you know, all decoys are different, but they come with an insert and you can pretty much install your own fan on here. So it's lifelike. Like I said, this one has been mangled because it's been through all kinds of weather, and it's been
miles and
kicked
miles
off
and miles
this decoy,
carrying
and spit on by toms and everything else. So
yeah. One thing you'll notice here too, we took a turkey tail fan that we had and we mounted it with the adapter that allows it to attach to the actual tom. But one thing that we wanted to do was really spark that dominance factor. And sometimes you get that bird, if you recall, we mentioned the inferior bird, you know, that's low in the pecking order, or the satellite bird that thinks that he has a chance. Sometimes,
or the twins that are pretty tough, but just not.
Yeah, just not quite enough.
Not quite enough.
And one thing that really sends those birds over the edge is the thought of a jake, a lowly jake with a small beard courting hens out there in their area. So what we did is we actually took that tail, this was originally a full mature tom tail, and cut stair steps. We cut some of these feathers off on the ends to give it the appearance of that jake undeveloped tail.
Yeah.
And just that little simple change right there really increases the confidence that the bird that hits the field and sees this comes in with. They think, oh, that's a jake, I can take it, and it makes a huge difference.
Big difference. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of jakes too, now this one, again, you can tell this is a jake, small beard. This one is not in strut. There may be certain times that you might want to give that look of the twins. You know, you've got the one that's strutting and you've got his buddy who's just kind of on the lookout. And so there are certain times that you might want to use a jake that's not in strut to be able to still bring those birds in and work with other scenarios.
For sure. Now the reason I grabbed this hen is because, like we said when we were going over in one of the earlier modules at the beginning, talking about the different genders, different sizes, different head colors, different things like that, you can see the difference, right? And they're so lifelike out in the field. The jake has that combination of the blue, the white, and the red. That red is indicating, you know, the bird's getting fired up. He's seeing the hen, that's triggering it. So the beard and the coloration of the head signifies and tells the tom from a distance. They can see that, you know. So it appears that the jake, bigger bodied bird, is checking out the hen, and he doesn't want to have any part of that. He does not want another dude coming in and stealing his girlfriend. So that's why I grabbed the hen, just to show the different sizes, head sizes, color variation, and things like that.
Yeah. And so as you can see, there's a wide variety of decoys that you can get. There's a wide variety in the quality and what you're paying for it. So you kind of have to make that decision. We kind of mentioned throughout the course that we'll mention products that are entry level and products that are higher level. You know, when you're paying for decoys like this, you're going to pay a pretty fair amount, for those decoys, but they last for a long time as long as you take care of them. And they're so convincing that you rarely have the flare situation that you can sometimes get. Say a bird's been hunted a bunch and they hit a field and they see a decoy that's foam that looks a little bit funky, not quite realistic. There have been plenty of times that I've had birds hit a field that I feel like they didn't like the looks of the decoy and actually left.
Yeah.
So you're paying the high dollar amount for these decoys. You are getting some benefits for that, So it's just a decision that you have to make when you're at that purchase point.
Right.
So now that we've talked about the types of decoys and looks and cost and things like that, there's a question, when do we use decoys? How do we use them? Where do we use them?
Are there situations though we don't use them?
Yeah. And the first thing would be, if you're going to use a decoy, where do you want to use it? Clearings, anything with high visibility makes a lot of sense. You may have times that you're cutting and running, going through the woods, running and gunning, and a bird strikes up, and maybe the best visibility you have is an area where, it's only a 50-yard clearing. Look for any advantage that can get you close to where that bird will be able to see the decoys. Obviously, if they can't see the decoys do no good to you.
Yeah.
So when do you use decoys and when do you not? You basically have to kind of play it by ear, judging on, what kind of vibe you're getting from that turkey that you're hearing. If he sounds really aggressive, it's a good time to have that decoy out there. If you think that he sounds and acts like a bird, say you've hunted him for 2 or 3 days and you have a feeling that he's decoy shy, you're going to probably want to leave those decoys at home and hunt that bird a little bit different. You're going to try and get that bird coming in, looking for the hen, and get him to come past you and shoot him on the way. So kind of depends on the feel that you get from that bird and how aggressive he is.
And I think a key component to that, and hopefully you guys are starting to really quickly realize why we structured this course in the way that we did. It was very strategic on how we mapped it out, because we talked about the hens and their breeding cycle, and you might have been thinking, well, why am I learning this? I just want to go out and kill a male turkey. Well, once you understand that, then all those factors start coming into play with what we're teaching now. So decoy strategy, like he was mentioning, depends on the earliest part of the season. If you have a season that's 6 weeks long, those birds are going through those phases. It's kind of like the rut for deer. You got your pre-stage that we talked about, and then you got your middle, and then you got your post, where those hens they're on the nest, they're by themselves. So that could be a completely different decoy setup and scenario. So it's good to know all of that. It's good to know that temperature and that vibe. A lot of that, only so much of this can be taught inside a course. A lot of that is getting out there and doing it, taking what we're teaching in this course and applying it, spending time in the woods. It's like the bass fisherman that I talked to years ago said, if you want to learn how to bass fish, you surround yourself with better people than you, and you spend a lot of time on the water. And we spend a lot of time surrounding people that are way better than us with turkey hunting, so we can bring you this information about decoying. But the best thing to do is spend time out in the woods and get to learn the feel of turkey communication, their vibes, their intensity levels, how passive they are, and everything in between. And it helps out a lot.
Of course, we understand you guys are here to try and learn as much as you can. So let's try and give our idea, like our most likely scenario for each one of the 3 stages. So let's say it is the pre-breeding stage, which is where they're trying to gather hens. So the tom, he's decided that it's breeding time. He's excited. The hens, they just want to feed. They're not thinking about anything else other than food and drink and safety. So he's thinking about, how do I gather up these hens? In that kind of scenario, what would be our number 1 setup that we'd go to?
I would like to use hens.
Just solely hens.
Solely hens are a good starting place. It's a good, especially if you're on that budget. You want to get that. You definitely want to get that hen out there, because he's out there doing what? He's gathering hens, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But in a situation where if he's not 100% fired up and ready to fight and get involved, then you might want to throw that Jake out there with those hens at that point.
Yeah. Make him get a little bit jealous, saying, hey, now wait a minute, I'm trying to gather hens, and yet this young Jake here has already started to do it. I'm going to go in and fight.
Yep.
So in a pre-breeding stage where he's gathering hens, probably would opt for something in the lines of like maybe a pair of hens or a pair of hens with a Jake. Now, let's say we get into the next stage, the henned up stage. Now, at this point, he's got all kinds of hens with him. He's got his harem established. He's not leaving those hens, typically. Would you even use decoys at that point?
Good question. In certain situations, if you're running and gunning, you might not want to use decoys. In that scenario, you might want to throw in the jealousy factor, because he's over there, he's got his harem, but he thinks he's big dog. He's got it in his head, hey, I'm the boss here. And then it might be good to throw out the strutter in the midst of the hens and make it look like, a full fan strutter and make him think, hey, something's going on over there. We didn't demonstrate any of the breeding decoys. I've seen those very effective during that time.
It makes good sense. Go ahead and put that strutter where in the pre-stage you may have used that Jake that's not in strut. It's not quite to that point. Now you're into the henned up stage, and he hits that field with his harem of hens, and he looks over and he sees a Jake in full strut with some hens. It's probably going to tick him off. The other option I would say on that situation, when they're henned up, would be to, just like you mentioned, completely forget about the decoys. At that point, you're probably going to be better either doing one of two things, and these strategies we'll discuss in the module coming up that covers all of the hunting strategies. But at that point, you're probably going to be better off either trying to get in front of where they're going and use woodsmanship skills to ambush that turkey and his hens, or else you're better off waiting until he's lost his hens and hitting that bird, say around 10, 11, noon. And once he's lost his hens, he's going to be a completely different bird to work with and maybe try and call him into it at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got our third scenario, our third breeding stage, which is the post-breeding. So now they've lost their hens and they're out searching for hens. What are we going to set up at that point?
Yeah, at that point, I would definitely go with the hens again because they're different hens than hens that have already been nested or off out of the field, right?
Yeah, he's looking for hens. He's lost all of his hens, so he's happy to see some out there.
Yeah, so hens for sure, man. You got to go with that number one.
Yeah, and one thing with that stage, as far as using a male decoy in the post-breeding stage, probably anytime, and you have to try and read the bird, anytime that you have a bird that's anything but the boss tom in the area or the twin toms that are, full of themselves, any other bird that's not that is probably going to turn tail and run at that point of the season if they see a male.
They've been doing a lot of fighting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of beating up on each other.
Yeah.
And we've had birds enter the field that have just kind of turned away and said, you know what, I'm not in the mood to deal with that today.
Yep. That time of year, if you put out that male decoy, there's a good chance that any of the birds that show up are turning and leaving rather than coming in. Whereas if you just have the hen decoys out, probably any one of those scenarios of birds in the pecking order are coming into it.
Right.
All right, so that's a lot of great tips as far as decoys, how to use them, when to use them, where to use them, and what type to use. And we'll cover more decoy placement and stuff like that in our upcoming module over hunting strategies.